right, welcome everybody back to an episode of the Big Doug and Carmi Show. Your one-stop shop for all things Commanders. If you're watching this on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure that you hit the notification bell so that you never miss an episode like today's episode with Brian Nemhauser. Brian, how are you?
I'm doing well. Nice to meet you, Big Doug.
Actually, absolutely. Let's see. Interesting. Let's start with the head coach. He was in the same cycle that the Commanders went a couple years ago. We're familiar with him from being right up the road with Baltimore as the defensive coordinator. I think a lot of people in Washington would have loved having him here. They went Dan Quinn. I know the Seattle is happy that they were able to get him. How has he been so far? One of the things people are always concerned about with a first-year head coach or first-time head coach in year two now is being able to assemble a staff, right? I'm curious how all of that came together for him last year.
Yeah, you hit on a lot of important points, and it is a fascinating tie between these two teams. I have to say, Mike Macdonald was the guy I was really pulling for the Seahawks to be able to hire. I thought he would be the top candidate for them to get. It's not easy to convince people to move across the country into the Northwest. So I thought it was kind of a long shot potentially. And the fact that he decided to do that is really a credit to John Schneider. Mike Macdonald's been pretty clear that that was the deciding factor for him. He felt like there was a really good partnership brewing there, liked the culture, felt like he could, fit right in. And, Dan Quinn was probably the guy right after Mike Macdonald if it didn't work out,
Right.
given his Seahawks ties. I was someone who was pretty high on Dan Quinn. A lot of Seahawks fans did not want to see Dan Quinn back here. They felt like maybe things he had not done as well in Atlanta after the Super Bowl and Dallas stuff. I think he is a fantastic person, a fantastic coach, and has a history of hiring a great staff. So I'm glad that he's had success there as well. But Mike Macdonald, youngest head coach in the NFL last year when he was hired, never had been a head coach. Basically, at the time he was hired, did not have a lot of choices left for who would be his offensive coordinator. Ryan Grubb had been here at University of Washington, and John Schneider had some familiarity. So kind of on a, trust fall, went with Ryan Grubb last year, and it did not go well. Ryan Grubb was a very pass-heavy coordinator. Mike Macdonald, to his credit, had the guts to fire him after one season and completely change the style of offense they're playing to better fit the identity that he wants. And so far, that's been a huge step forward for this team. And that coaching staff is as connected and aligned as any coaching staff I've observed.
What kind of how much room does he get from Schneider decision wise? Like, is his show and you run it? How much say does John Schneider have? How does that kind of work? Because it's in the modern NFL, it feels like everybody gets GM and head coach together. Obviously, that is not the way that Seattle has done it forever. How has that pairing worked so far?
Yeah, it's been really productive, and John Schneider is always been a kind of consensus building GM. He's not a dictator. He's not going to unilaterally say this is what we're going to do, and you guys are going to just like it. He's always worked closely with his scouts, whether they're area scouts or his pro personnel or his college personnel guys. Obviously, Jim Nagy, who I think you guys are familiar with, came from Schneider's tree and went on to the Senior Bowl. And so like he's I think has a pretty good reputation at being someone that's easy to work with. And I think that's part of what attracted Macdonald here. As far as decision making goes, I think that's a pretty much a partnership. I don't think that there's a situation where John Schneider would do something that Mike Macdonald objected to, and I don't think Mike Macdonald would do something that John Schneider objected to. But I do think there's some deference, right? Like ultimately, John Schneider is going to make the draft pick. Ultimately, John Schneider is going to decide who gets paid what. But ultimately, Mike Macdonald's going to decide who starts, who makes the roster, what scheme they're running, what plays they're calling. So, it's I think been a very productive thing. And one of the things that's been interesting is I think Mike Macdonald complements some of John Schneider's, I wouldn't say weaknesses, but his lack, not a strength. Mike Macdonald is a very analytical guy. He's going to be into the numbers. He's going to be into a lot of details. He's kind of a type A personality. And John Schneider is much more like kind of the Will Ferrell, Adam Sandler kind of personality. So, I think the two of them together have been a really good match.
It was interesting when Kubiak was in with the Texans. They had a couple of really good years, and then obviously the down year. They decided to make a change when they made the head coaching change. You mentioned Grubbs out. You bring in Kubiak. You want to run the ball more. That's one way to get it done, right? How has that new system affected the two running backs there in Seattle?
Well, the interesting thing is the expectation, my expectation at least, was that they would come out of the gates maybe a little bit better as a running team than a passing team. The Sam Darnold's, coming off his season, getting used to a new coordinator, although he had some experience in San Francisco with Clint Kubiak, new receivers, new tight ends, and a new offensive line, and that maybe they would really lean on the run. Well, they've definitely committed to running the ball. They run it more than almost any other team in the NFL, but they haven't run it that well. And so, what has happened is that they have been the most explosive passing offense in football. And part of what's going on there that I don't know that the rest of the NFL is totally caught up with is the Seahawks have faced the highest percentage of stacked boxes on offense, meaning that there's 8 or more defenders near the line of scrimmage. And they're doing that in a couple of ways. One, they're running a lot of either 12 personnel with 2 tight ends or 21 with a fullback, and they get Robbie Utes back, their fullback. And that's bringing some extra defenders. And then they're also motioning to create kind of stacks on one side that's often pulling a safety down and giving them a lot of single high safety looks. So then they can attack it through the air. And JSN has just gone nuclear this year. So they right now are maybe having a harder running environment to succeed in, but it's creating this explosive passing. And so at one point, a defense is going to say, hey, we're going to dare you to run and we're going to take away these explosives. But if they do that, then I think Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet are two guys that, have the potential to put up big numbers themselves. So it's a little bit of pick your poison. And so far, every team has kind of been picking the passing game to be their poison, and it's killed most of them.
Sam Darnold is interesting. It's funny about the league, right? The NFL is funny in general, right? And you never know what's going to happen. But there are this group of former first rounders that just kind of got sent out to the hinterland somewhere. And now, after a couple of more years, some seasoning, some of that is stopping by with really good head coaches and quarterback gurus, as they call them. But Sam Darnold seems to be one of those guys that has just kind of re-elevated himself to what a former number one pick looks like. What does he attribute to the success?
Sam Darnold is given a lot of credit to his time in San Francisco as being a key area of growth for him. That happened to be when Clint Kubiak was there, but also he got to observe Brock Purdy, and he's talked a lot about the fact that the way that Brock Purdy approached it, kind of more like a point guard, just distributing, getting rid of the ball quickly, taking advantage of dump offs. I think it was pretty impactful for him. And I think that showed up a little bit in Minnesota. I think it's shown up even more this year, where Sam Darnold's gone from last year being one of the slower time to throw quarterbacks in the NFL to one of the fastest time to throw quarterbacks in the NFL. He's getting rid of the ball, he's getting rid of it on time, and he's accurate. And the fact of the matter is the Seahawks have allowed 9 sacks through 7 weeks. That is the second lowest total in the history of this franchise. And I don't know that anybody would have thought Sam Darnold, who was sacked, what was it, 8 times in one game in the playoffs? Maybe it was 9. I can't remember. Would only be sacked 9 times so far this season. So that's been a huge, huge change for him. Although I will say the last game against the Texans, he had 2 really costly sacks that were not good decisions on his part. And so that is something that, it's hard to completely erase, some of the habits that you've had over the years. So it's going to be something he's going to continue to have to focus on.
It's interesting that number is so low. The left side of the line, I went and looked at the depth chart before we did this show today. I'm familiar with those guys, but from the center on to the right are guys that are at least not household names. They're not names I'm familiar with. Tell us a little bit about that right side of the line.
Yeah, that's a great call out. So Abe Lucas is a guy that should be a household name. He has not yet been, because after a really strong rookie season, he was drafted the same year as Charles Cross, their left tackle. He was drafted in the 3rd round, Cross in the 1st round. Cross was a top 10 pick. But that rookie season, Abe Lucas was actually the better player on the field. And he's a ferocious run blocker. He is a good pass protector, but he had an injury that ended up keeping him out for a season. a little bit more than that. And so people kind of forgot. And he got in the last half of last year, admittedly, from his perspective, was playing on, quote, a flat tire. His leg was not totally back to full health. And now he is his full self. And since week 4, really, since he had a elbow issue he was dealing with the first couple of weeks, since week 4, he is a top 5 tackle in the NFL. He's, at least by PFF grading, he's up there with Lane Johnson and Trent Williams and all those guys. So he's a really, really good player. I think a player that could be a Pro Bowler as soon as this year. And then the other 2 players are interesting. Jalen Sundell is their center. He went to school with Gray Zabel, their rookie left guard. They were roommates. And so they're now getting to play together in the NFL. This is Jalen Sundell's first year as a starting center. He's such a good athlete. They actually had him as a backup tackle last year. They now have moved him inside. Very athletic in terms of getting out, but not the strongest guy. So he's someone that can be susceptible to power on the inside. And, you got a guy like Daron Payne or Javon Kinlaw, they're looking to take advantage. And right guard is the spot that's been a weak point and a real concern for a lot of Seahawks fans. Anthony Bradford has had some really low lows this season. Generally, I think he's been a pretty good, I would say, let me not say good, I would say a league average player. I think what a lot of people don't realize is just how bad guard play is in the NFL. Just about every franchise has a fan thinking they've got the worst player on the line in the NFL. And I know you guys have struggled a little bit with Josh Connerly Jr. probably, but in any event, Bradford's a guy that some people are hoping the Seahawks find a way to replace at the trade deadline, get a veteran from Cleveland or Tennessee or something like that. It's pretty rare for teams to trade passable guards in the NFL at the trade deadline. So my guess is Anthony Bradford's going to be there for a little while.
When we were talking about coaches earlier, I'd like to get back to that for a second. I think of Dan Quinn as like a player's coach, and he does vet rest days, and they can be not lax, but everybody's having a good time. Is that what we're seeing out of McDonald, or are those practices a little tighter?
Yeah, that's it's really interesting because so McDonald comes from like a little military family. He has that in his blood, and he's certainly an intense type A like guy, right? And so that's in there. He can be, to use the term red ass, like he can get into it with people in ways that Pete Carroll never would have here. At the same time, he is not Bill Belichick. He absolutely wants to connect with his players. He has a leadership council of veterans. He listens to them. He's letting the team define a lot of what their identity is. He's very humble and has a lot of humility in how he leads. And I think he actually even acknowledged that this offseason, on the advice from John Schneider, he is getting coaching from Michael Gervais, a doctor, performance psychologist who worked with Pete Carroll and a lot of the players during the LOB era, just in terms of like they actually are watching his team meetings, the recordings of those, and giving him feedback on how he can present things or how he can engage the team. So he's really interested in making sure it's a really cordial, energetic, joyful environment, but he also wants people to be on their P's and Q's. So he's kind of, I think, a pretty good combination of both.
You mentioned all the explosives in the passing game on offense, and I'm thinking about the amount of explosives that this defense is giving up. Are you surprised that Dan Quinn defense is giving up so many explosive plays in the passing game?
Yeah, I mean, I will say when I did my preview for this game, I look at teams from a bunch of different metrics and a bunch of different ways, and it's pretty rare for me to find a 1 versus 32 matchup in any individual number. Seahawks are number 1 in yards per attempt. The Commanders are 32nd in yards per attempt allowed. That's not good if you're a Commanders fan. And yeah, I'm a little bit surprised, but I don't think about it as a Dan Quinn team. I'm like very confused by the Adam Peters offseason. I loved what I saw from Jaden Daniels, who couldn't in his rookie season. As far as I'm concerned, he was right there in the MVP conversation. I mean, I have not seen a rookie play that well and that maturely and get that far in the playoffs, and I don't know how long. So To then go out there and get a player like Debo Samuel, who's a little bit further along, like a little bit later in his career. You still have an older guy in Zach Ertz. And then defensively, you get Trey Amos, who I think could be a decent player, but still relying on Marshawn Lattimore. You still got a we love Bobby Wagner out here, but it's no surprise that he's going to struggle in coverage at his age. Frankie Louvu's also still older. I didn't get the offseason. Laramie Tunsil was the only move where I was like, that makes sense. So I don't know that he's got the horses on that side of the ball. And then you've had injuries, obviously. You lose Dietrich Wise, you lose, Dorrance Armstrong and some other guys along the way. But even without that, I'm not sure I see the guys to really get it done. I think they're to some extent overachieving their talent, if you believe that.
Well, and Mikey Sanders-Drill, who had an outstanding year last year, is regressing again, which is another big part of that secondary that you mentioned.
I'm a
You
big
jumped-
fan of his, by the way. I loved him coming out, so I wouldn't bet that he's done yet. I think he's got a resurgence coming.
I think he does. It's interesting because they moved him outside last year because of sheer need, right? The cornerback play was just so bad on the boundary, and he hasn't played that much corner. So moving him back into nickel, which, as you know, Brian, is basically a whole different position than boundary corner. You're asking him to learn something new again. I wonder what he'd have been like if they just kept him on the boundary. That's a different story for a different day. You mentioned earlier about the when you can find number ones versus number 32s. It was not that long ago that the Commanders were in the top 5 of the rushing attacks. That has come down since Marcus Mariota's in, since the receivers have been out, and you've kind of been able to just say, hey, listen, if you can run around this, great, have at it. We just aren't going to allow your receivers that nobody's heard of to get open on us. The Seahawks defense, if I'm not mistaken, is giving up something like 3.3 yards per carry. Makes me nervous about getting that run game going on Sunday night.
Yeah, this is, I think, maybe the biggest aspect of this matchup from a Commanders offensive standpoint. I mean, you can kind of pick, but the Commanders have not won a game where they've rushed for fewer than 163 yards. So that's a big number to try to get. And the Seahawks haven't allowed a team to rush for more than 89 yards since week 1. And even that week, it took, a ton of carries. Christian McCaffrey averaged 3.1 yards per carry that week. So the Seahawks run defense has been the best in the NFL by almost pretty much any metric you look at. It's the best in the NFL. And one of the things that's been really impressive about how they do it is they play one of the lighter boxes in the NFL. So they are not stacking the box. They're not putting extra defenders. That front line, their defensive line are just full of grown men. Ernest Jones is a heat-seeking missile at inside backer. And, they've got two nickel corners in Nick Emmanwori and Devin Witherspoon, who are both excellent at defending the run, excellent at blitzing, and excellent in coverage. And Nick Emmanwori is 6'3", 220, jumped 43 inches in the vert and ran a 4.38 40. He's like literally the most athletic safety in the history of the combine. So they're able
for McDonald, right? I mean,
he
he
was
built for that defense.
He absolutely was. And I think a lot of teams missed on him because they didn't know how to use him. And Mike Macdonald had a very clear idea. And so far, he's looking like the smart guy that he's often proved to be. So the Seahawks are basically able to play a lot of extra guys in coverage. They don't blitz, and they're able to get pass pressure with 4 guys, and they're able to defend the run with like 6 guys in the box. It's made them a very tough defense to solve for most offenses.
We've last couple of times that the Commanders played Baltimore, we've looked at that Mike Macdonald defense on the film breakdown. And one thing that we always noticed and commented on is, and it kind of what you were saying there, is the simulated pressures he can use and get there with 4 are more exotic than some of these exotic 5 and 6 guard NASCAR packages that we see. He does it all the time. It's not surprising to me that he's doing it there. The one thing I found interesting, Ryan, when I was looking at the depth chart this morning was under Will linebacker, there are 2 guys. Under Sam linebacker, there are 3 guys. Interesting depth chart.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know that I even consider them having a Sam linebacker. I mean, Ernest Jones is their Mike. and he's really their only, Mike that I would expect to get any playing time. Then their will has been initially it was Tyrese Knight, who was a rookie last year, played pretty well, but did have some errors in coverage. This year, Drake Thomas, little known, a smaller player, I think out of NC State, started to push Tyrese Knight for snaps, and as of a couple of games ago, has become the full-time starter. And Drake Thomas is a guy that excels in coverage, very smart linebacker. Also has shown off in being able to get to the quarterback, as well as making some good plays against the run. So I think he's more likely to be their guy at linebacker. And then the other guys you're talking about, essentially outside backers in this 3-4 defense. So whether it's Demarcus Lawrence, Derek Hall, Boye Mafe, Uchenna Nwosu, what's really started to stand out is the vets there. Demarcus Lawrence and Uchenna Nwosu have been playing fantastic football. Uchenna Nwosu has the most sacks, well, I guess now since last week happened, probably not, but since he returned and got to full health in week 4, he's got 5 sacks in those, I think, 4 games since. Has been really, really effective, and both of them are excellent run defenders as well.
3-0 on the road this year, coming off of a bye week. If Dan Quinn came up to you and said, Brian, what's the key to pulling the upset against Seattle this week? You tell him what?
Yeah, I've been looking for it because I personally, as someone who follows the Seahawks closely, I don't like situations where everything points to a win, because that often never is what you think is going to happen in the NFL. And honestly, that might be the best thing. Is I think the Commanders are playing for their season. I think Dan Quinn is an excellent motivator. I think Jaden Daniels is a unicorn of a player. You're going to be at home on Sunday night. You're going to get the absolute best out of that Commanders team when everyone's going to count them out. That can often be enough. Now, if you're talking X's and O's, the only X's and O's thing that I would point to that I think does advantage the Commanders is that they're a pretty good no-huddle team. They do that quite a bit. And the Seahawks defense, while amazing, tends to be one that requires some communication and prep before the play. So they're not one of the better no-huddle defensive teams in the league. That would probably be the thing that I would hang my hat on. And the other would be, we got to find some way to get Sam Darnold to make a mistake that gives our offense a short field, or our special teams, which has been excellent for Washington. Seahawks fans know Larry Izzo well.
Yes.
Have them, that unit, get in there and make a big play. So it's going to have to be one of those types of games, because I don't really think there's almost any obvious advantage that I can see for the Commanders over the Seahawks. I'd love to know if you have any.
Yeah, I'd like to say that it's in that run game and make it a short game, but as we know, that has not worked real well against the Seahawks. I find it a daunting task on Sunday night, but you're right. It's basically for the season. So as far as the X's and O's, you're right. I think it's tough to see it, particularly no Terry McLaurin again this week.
That's too bad. He's such a fun player to watch.
He is, and he's fantastic. And the one game he was able to play here last week, he was pretty good in. I will say that watching Debo up close, he's been better than what I expected him to be when he gets here. They've allowed him to run routes. Basically, he's had to run routes since he got here. It's one of the things he wanted to leave San Francisco to do, was prove he could be a route runner. And so he'll need to have a big day. And I agree. The special teams, whether it's been him or the younger McCaffrey, who is, I think, leading the league now in kickoff return yards, which has been big for them. So they may need something like that, a big special play. Brian, we get out of here on this. I went and found a couple of over-under props. I'd like you to help me put a parlay together for the Seahawks.
All right.
That's 7.5 receptions for Smith-Njigba.
Ooh, it's funny. Hit receptions. I don't really even know what he's averaging reception wise. I know what he's averaging yardage wise, but I'm going to go under. I'm going to go under. I think the Seahawks are going to end up using their tight ends a little bit more and maybe attacking some different players.
Okay, let's see. I'll write these down. Sam Darnold, 246.5 passing yards.
I am going to go under. I think the Seahawks are going to actually have more luck running. Well, not more luck. I think they're going to focus on running the ball, and I think that's going to lead to a lower passing yardage total.
Kenneth Walker, anytime touchdown.
I'll take that. Yes, I'll take a yes on that one.
Okay. Cooper Kupp, 38.5 yards receiving.
I'll go over on that one.
How's he been for them for this year?
I think it's a little bit in the eye of the beholder. I think he's been more than I expected him to be. He's certainly been available, which has been a key thing. And then he has made most of the plays thrown his way, and been one of their best run blockers, and has an amazing work ethic and leader in that locker room. So I think he's been a pretty good addition for this team.
And last one here, Zach Charbonnet is at 41.5 rushing yards.
I'm gonna go under. I think Ken Walker is going to be the guy that gets the yards this game.
That the current over-under is at 47.5. You like this to be an explosive game or a low-scoring game?
I have a feeling the Seahawks are gonna get a lot of those points. So I think one team might score a lot of points. I'm not sure the other one will. If it's close, I think something will probably have gone wrong for Seattle. And I don't say that from a super homerish way. It's just I look at these games and I'm just like I see a lot of ways that the Commanders could lose touch in this game.
Well, they'll both be wearing the throwbacks on Sunday night, and I'm excited to see that. Brian, this has been fantastic, man. Have a safe trip to DC, and thank you for the time today.
Appreciate you. Nice to meet you, Big Doug.
All right, nice to meet you.